Imagine for a second, you're a business executive, right?
Right.
And you're looking at a market where one single competitor, just one, controls over 90% of the entire industry.
90%. It's almost impossible to even wrap your head around that number.
It is. They're the Goliath to end all Goliaths. They have retailers in a chokehold, developers on a leash, and the customers are just completely mesmerized.
To the average person, the brand name is the product. You don't play a video game.
No, you play Nintendo. That's what it was.
It sounds like a complete monopoly. In business school, they'd tell you to just find another industry, go somewhere else. It's like trying to start a search engine today to compete with Google.
It's even harder.
Yeah.
Because you have to build hardware, physical boxes.
Right.
But then this smaller, scrappier rival comes along. They've got less money, a smaller team, a brand that, frankly, nobody really cares about. And within just a few years, they don't just break the monopoly. They actually surpass the giant.
And they do it with sheer attitude.
Yeah.
With guerrilla marketing and the blue hedgehog with a need for speed.
It is, and I don't think this is an exaggeration. Arguably the greatest underdog story in the history of consumer electronics.
But it's also, and this is the really fascinating part for me, it's also a cautionary tale. It's a story about how internal politics, corporate pride, can absolutely destroy the most successful revolution from the inside.
Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Literally!
Welcome to the Strategy Sync YouTube channel. Please subscribe and like to hear new book summaries. Today we are diving deep into the book Console Wars by Blake J. Harris.
In this book, it's just a phenomenal reconstruction of that era, the early 1990s video game industry. It's all built on hundreds of interviews, so you're not getting a sanitized corporate history. You're getting the real, behind-the-scenes, well, the dirt.
The dirt, exactly.
Yeah.
And the main players are Nintendo, this sort of disciplined, family-friendly giant, and Sega, the cool, edgy upstart.
And the central character in all of this, the person at the heart of the drama, isn't a game designer. He isn't a coder. He's a guy named Tom Kalinske.
And the crazy thing is, when our story starts, Tom Kalinske knows absolutely nothing about video games.
Nothing. Zero. Zip. But, and this is the key, he knew everything about branding.
And that distinction, that's what makes this whole deep dive so interesting, right? We're not just talking about bits and bytes and processing power here.
No, we're talking about how you take a piece of plastic and give it a soul, a personality, an attitude.
So let's unpack this. Who is this guy, Tom Kalinske, and why on earth did a Japanese video game company want a man who basically spent his entire career playing with dolls?
Well, playing with dolls is maybe underselling it just a little bit.
Okay, fair enough.
Kalinske was a legend at Mattel. I mean, before he got there, Barbie, and it's hard to imagine this now, Barbie was considered a dying brand.
Really? Barbie?
Yeah, in the early 80s, a lot of mothers thought the doll was shallow, sales were totally flatlining, and Kalinske came in and revived it by understanding one simple concept: market segmentation.
How do you segment a doll? I mean, it's just Barbie.
See, that was the old thinking. He realized you shouldn't just sell Barbie. You sell day-to-night Barbie. You sell astronaut Barbie, Dr. Barbie, CDO Barbie. He gave girls a way to project their own ambitions onto the doll.
Oh, I see. So it wasn't just about fashion anymore.
No, it was about role play, about career aspirations. He turned a simple toy into a vehicle for imagination, and then he'd do it again. But for boys.
He-Man.
He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And this is a really crucial point for what happens later with Sega. Kalinske understood that a toy is just a lump of plastic until you give it a story.
A backstory. A mythology.
Yes. He proved that if you create a world, a cartoon, a comic book, the toy becomes a talisman for that world. He-Man wasn't just an action figure. He was the hero of Eternia. That philosophy is what would eventually give birth to Sonic the Hedgehog.
But before Sega, he has this brief stint at Matchbox Cars, and there's this incredible story in the book that just perfectly highlights the kind of guy he was.
Well, the Spain story, it's amazing.
So he leaves Mattel, he goes to Matchbox, and the company is just hemorrhaging money. So he does the logical thing, moves all the production to Asia to cut costs. But then he's looking at the numbers.
Yeah.
And he sees that Matchbox cars are selling weirdly well in Spain, but the company is making zero profit there. None.
Right. So, most CEOs, what would they do? They'd look at a spreadsheet, send a strongly worded email, maybe hire an auditor to go check it out.
Not Kalinske. He gets on a plane. He flies to Barcelona.
Himself.
Gets in a cab, hands the driver a business card for the local distributor, and the driver just nods and says, Matchbox C.
Okay. So far, so good.
But the driver takes him to a building that is not the office on the card. It's this rundown factory in a really sketchy part of town. Kalinske just walks in,
Wow.
and he sees an assembly line, an entire assembly line just churning out Matchbox cars.
No way.
Yeah.
A rogue factory.
A rogue factory. The distributor, his own partner in the region, had set up a completely illegal counterfeit operation. They were making the cars, selling them under the Matchbox name, and pocketing all the cash.
That's unbelievable. He just walked into the middle of a criminal enterprise.
In a suit. He's just standing there in the middle of this whole illegal operation, and all the workers are staring at him like, who is this guy? The machinery is loud. It smells like oil and metal.
What does he do?
He spots a payphone in the corner. This is the 80s, remember? And he calls his partner back in the U.S. to explain what's happening. And as he's on the phone, he realizes the mood in the room is shifting. The workers are not happy to see him.
I bet. They probably think he's the police or something.
Exactly. So what does he do?
He runs.
He sprints. He just drops the phone, runs out of the factory, jumps back in the same cab, and the only Spanish he can think to yell is, "Vamanos! Vamanos!"
That's incredible, but it tells you everything you need to know about him. He wasn't a spreadsheet guy. He had to see things for himself on the ground. He had this adventurous spirit.
For sure. But, eventually he gets burned out on the whole toy industry. It's a grind. So he retires. He's sitting on a beach in Hawaii with his wife and daughters, trying to relax. And he is bored out of his mind.
And this is where Hayao Nakayama enters the picture, the president of Sega Enterprises.
The scene is just so cinematic, you can just picture it. Kalinske is on a beach in Maui, probably covered in sunscreen, trying to read a book. And suddenly this Japanese man with this wind-blown comb-over is standing over him, blocking the sun.
Nakayama had tracked him down on the beach.
And this first interaction, it just defines their entire relationship. Kalinske admits, he actually hates the beach. He hates relaxing. He tells Nakayama it's boring.
And Nakayama's eyes just light up. He gets this huge grin and says, boring. Yes, it is boring for people like us.
That's such a key moment, isn't it? Because Nakayama wasn't your typical buttoned-up Japanese executive.
Not at all. He was loud, he was impulsive, incredibly ambitious. He was an eccentric in a corporate culture that really valued conformity. And he saw a kindred spirit in Kalinske. He knew he needed a cowboy, an American cowboy, to run the American division because playing by the traditional Japanese rules just wasn't going to work against Nintendo.
But Kalinske is hesitant. I mean, he's a toy guy, not a tech guy. He knows nothing about this stuff.
Right.
So he does something that I just love. He asks his 5-year-old daughter, Ashley.
The ultimate focus group.
Right. He asks her, should I go to Japan with this man? And she just says yes.
You should never underestimate the market research of a 5-year-old. He probably just thought video games sounded more fun than dolls.
Probably. So Kalinske agrees. He flies to Japan. And this is where we really need to set the scene. For you to understand the miracle that Sega pulled off, you have to understand the absolute stranglehold that Nintendo had on the market in 1990.
It was total dominance. We're talking between 90 and 95% of the U.S. market.
That's just mind-boggling.
And they ruled with an iron fist. They had these incredibly strict licensing agreements. So if you were a third-party developer, a company like Konami or Capcom, and you wanted to make a game for the NES...
Which you had to because that's where the players were.
Exactly. You had to agree to exclusivity. You were forbidden from making that same game for any other console for 2 years.
Wow. And what about the retailers? The stores?
Terrified. The retailers were absolutely terrified of crossing Nintendo because Nintendo controlled the supply. They were masters of managing scarcity. So if you're a Toys R Us manager and you don't give them the best shelf space, well, maybe your big Christmas shipment of Super Mario Bros. 3 arrives a month late. Or maybe you only get half of what you ordered. For a toy store during the holidays, that's a death sentence.
And meanwhile, Sega is...
Yeah.
What are they doing? They're just kind of... there.
They're trying. They have a console out, the Sega Genesis, and it's a 16-bit console.
Right. And for anyone who doesn't know the tech specs, going from 8-bit, which was Nintendo, to 16-bit, that's a huge leap.
It's like going from a black and white TV to color, or from dial-up internet to broadband. It allowed for way more colors on screen, much better sound, and faster movement. Technically speaking, the Genesis was twice as powerful as the NES.
But nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Their marketing slogan is, Genesis does what Nintendo.
Which is kind of catchy, I guess?
It's catchy, sure. But as Nakayama himself pointed out to Kalinske, it's totally empty. Genesis does what Nintendo. Does what? Lose money. Confuse customers. It defines your entire brand in relation to your competitor, which automatically makes you look like the beta. the second fiddle.
So Kalinske goes to Japan, he tours the R&D labs, and he has his aha moment.
Yeah, he sees two things. First, he sees the Game Gear, which is their new handheld.
Yeah.
And it has a full color screen. He immediately compares it to the Game Boy, which was just that monochrome green and black screen.
A huge difference.
A night and day difference. And then he looks at the graphics on the Genesis versus the NES, and it just clicks for him.
The hardware wasn't the problem.
The product was not the problem. The hardware was objectively, demonstrably superior. The problem was 100% marketing and perception. Nintendo was Coke. It was family, trust, fun. Sega was nothing. It was RC Cola.
So he realized he didn't need to fix the machine.
He needed to fix the story.
So he comes back to the U.S., locks himself away, and comes up with a plan. A radical 4-point plan. And he walks into this board meeting with all the top executives from Sega of Japan, and he basically just drops a bomb on the table.
This meeting it's legendary in business circles. You have to picture it. A room full of very conservative, very traditional Japanese executives, and in walks this American branding guy who proceeds to propose 4 ideas that go against every single instinct of their company culture.
Okay, let's break them down. Point 1, the mascot.
Right. So at the time, the Genesis came bundled with a game called Altered Beast. It was fine. Rise from your grave and all that.
A classic, but not a system seller.
Not at all. Kalinske says, no. We have this new game in development, Sonic the Hedgehog. We need to put that in the box instead, and we need to give it away for free.
Just imagine telling a room full of accountants that you want to take your single best, most expensive new product, the one that costs millions to develop, and just give it away for $0.
They must have thought he was insane. It's the classic loss leader strategy, right? But on a scale that was just massive. Kalinske argued, if we give them the best game for free, they will buy the system. If they buy the system, we own the living room, and then they will buy 10 other games from us.
He was playing the long game.
Totally. Okay, point 2, the price.
He wanted to slash the price of the console.
Significantly, from $189 down to $149. Again, gutting the profit margins on the hardware in order to gain market share, to get an installed base. He wanted to make the barrier to entry as low as humanly possible.
Makes sense. Okay, point 3, Americanize the marketing.
This was the big culture clash. Sega of Japan's ads were they were very Japanese. They were polite.
Yeah.
Colorful. They focused on the sort of wonder of the technology.
And Kalinske said,
He said, no. We need to be edgy. We need to be aggressive. We need to actively mock Nintendo. Our target audience is not little kids. It's teenagers and college students.
a completely different demographic.
Yeah.
And finally, point 4, development.
Yeah, he wanted to develop games specifically for the American market.
Which meant sports.
Specifically sports games. He knew American teenagers loved the NFL, the NBA, and they wanted realism. They didn't want the cute, cartoonish sports games Nintendo was known for. They wanted real stats, real teams, and real athletes' names on the box. This was just unheard of at the time.
So he lays all this out. What's the reaction in the room?
Dead silence. Just stunned silence. And then Nakayama, he just loses it. The story goes that he kicks a chair or the table or a door. It depends on who's telling it. But he stands up and he just screams at everyone.
He hated the plan.
He thought the ideas were completely insane. He was convinced they would bankrupt the company. He's yelling, and then he just stops. He calms down. He looks at Kalinske, and he says the magic words.
What were they?
He says, "I think it is a bad idea, but I promised you autonomy. Go ahead."
Wow. That is the moment, isn't it?
That is the moment. That's when Sega of America is truly born. Without that one sentence, that one act of trust, none of the rest of this happens.
That's incredible leadership, really. To disagree with every fiber of your being, but still trust the person you hired to do the job.
It is. But it also, and this is important, it sets up the central tragedy of the entire book. Nakayama let Kalinske succeed, but as we're going to see, the rest of Sega of Japan, they never really forgave the Americans for being right.
So they have the green light. Now they need the weapon. They need Sonic.
Sonic is such a great case study in character design because when you look back at him now, he seems so perfectly 90s, so inevitable. But the original concept, it was a mess.
His code name was Mr. Needlemouse.
Mr. Needlemouse. Can you imagine? Hey, Mom, can I get Mr. Needlemouse for my birthday?
It sounds like a knitting simulator or something.
It's terrible. And the original Japanese design was really aggressive. He had these sharp fangs. He was the lead singer in a rock band. And he had a human girlfriend named Madonna who was very curvy.
A hedgehog with a human girlfriend.
Yeah, it was. It was weird. like a less charming Who Framed Roger Rabbit? So Kalinski's American team, particularly Madeline Schroeder and Al Nilsson, they basically sanitized him for the U.S. market.
So what did they change?
They softened the spikes, they got rid of the fangs completely, and they definitely ditched the human girlfriend.
But they kept the attitude. And this goes back to the He-Man lesson, right?
100%. Mario was a happy mute plumber. He had no real personality beyond just being the good guy. Yeah. Sonic had a smirk, he had an eyebrow raise, he tapped his foot, and here's the absolute genius part. They made him impatient.
Right. If you put the controller down, he'd look out at the screen at you.
He'd tap his foot on the ground and look at his watch as if to say, I'm waiting, let's go. He was breaking the fourth wall.
That resonated so perfectly with the MTV generation. Impatient, fast, a little bit arrogant.
And of course, the speed. The entire gameplay was built around speed to show off the blast processing.
Now, blast processing was basically just a marketing term, wasn't it?
It was 100% a made-up marketing term, but it described a real technical advantage. The Genesis CPU had a faster clock speed than the Super Nintendo. It could move sprites around the screen faster. And Sonic moved so fast that the Super Nintendo literally could not have run that game. The hardware would have choked.
So it was the perfect demonstration of why you needed to buy a Genesis.
Exactly. It wasn't just a game, it was a tech demo with incredible personality.
And to launch the sequel, they came up with an idea that completely changed the industry. Sonic Tuesday.
Yeah, this was for Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and it really did revolutionize everything. Before this, video games just sort of trickled into stores. You know, whenever the delivery truck arrived, they'd put them on the shelf. New York might get a game on a Monday, but Iowa might not see it until Friday.
It was inefficient, no hype.
Right. Al Nilsson came up with the idea of a street date, a single global coordinated launch day, Tuesday, November 24th. And the hype they built around it was massive. They shipped millions of copies worldwide to all arrive at the exact same moment.
It turned a simple software release into something else.
It turned it into a blockbuster movie premiere. It made an event out of it. And it put Sonic on the same level of cultural recognition as Mickey Mouse, at least for a time.
So they have the mascot. Now they need the voice. Which brings us to the marketing warfare. The Sega scream.
Sega, you can just hear it in your head, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. It's primal. It's burned into my brain.
So Kalinske hires this ad agency, Goodbye Berlin and Silverstein, and they create a campaign that was just frantic and loud and weird. The commercials had these super fast cuts, MTV-style editing, and the message was crystal clear.
Nintendo's a toy.
Nintendo is a toy. It's for your little brother who still jumps in puddles. Sega is for you. It was the Welcome to the Next Level campaign.
And a key part of that was positioning Sega not as a toy company, but as a consumer electronics company, like Sony or Panasonic.
Yes, and that strategy is what leads to one of my favorite stories in the book, the story of Segaville.
Oh, this is such a great story, just the culture clash alone.
It's amazing. So Walmart was the gatekeeper. If your product wasn't in Walmart, you basically didn't exist in huge parts of America, and Walmart was fiercely, fiercely loyal to Nintendo.
So what'd they do?
Kalinske and Shinobu Toyoda, who was his right-hand man and the main liaison to Japan, they literally rented a house and set up a headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas, right next to Walmart's home office.
You just have to picture these two. A tall, confident American executive and a formal Japanese businessman just living together in early 90s Arkansas.
They called it Segaville. They completely embedded themselves in the local culture. They went to the local bars, the diners, and they relentlessly pitched the Walmart buyers day after day.
And the pitch wasn't just, we have fun games, was it?
No, the pitch was much smarter. It was, Nintendo is treating you, Walmart, like children. They dictate your stock levels. They dictate your prices. We will treat you like partners.
It was a business-to-business revolution aimed at the retailers.
And it worked. They broke Nintendo's stranglehold, but they also had to win over the kids directly. And to do that, they went to the malls.
A mall tour.
Al Nilsson's genius strategy. It was, as you said before, the Pepsi Challenge for video games. They set up these kiosks in malls all across America, and the cheekiest
I know what you're going to say.
They set one up in a mall right near Nintendo of America's headquarters in Redmond, Washington.
That's just an incredible level of boldness. Yeah. Just trolling them in their own backyard.
Total troll move. And they'd have a Super Nintendo playing Super Mario World or Super Mario Kart right next to a Genesis playing Sonic the Hedgehog. And they just asked kids to play both and say which one they liked better.
And the result?
The kids overwhelmingly picked Sonic. And you have to ask why. It's because it was visceral. You didn't need to play Sonic for an hour to get it. In 30 seconds, you felt the speed, you felt the attitude. Then you go play Mario, and it just felt slow, plodding. It made Nintendo feel old-fashioned in an instant.
While all this is happening, Kalinske is also innovating on the software side of things. He realizes that if they really want that older demographic, the teenagers, the college kids, they need sports.
Yeah, Nintendo sports games were cute. They had these chubby little cartoon players. They were very arcade style, not realistic at all.
So Sega went the other way.
They went completely the other way. They signed Joe Montana to be the face of their football game. They made the games look like a real TV broadcast. They changed the camera angle to be behind the quarterback, which was revolutionary.
And there's a great detail here about their partnership with Electronic Arts. Trip Hawkins at EA had actually reverse engineered the Genesis console, right?
Yes, this was a total pirate move. EA figured out how to bypass Sega security chips so they can make games without a license. So Trip Hawkins goes to Kalinske and basically says, look, I can release these games without paying you a single dime, and you can sue me, but I'll make all my money before the court case is even over. Or you can cut me a special deal.
That's basically corporate blackmail.
It's a very aggressive negotiation, let's say that. Now, Nintendo would have sued them into oblivion. They would have buried them in legal fees. Kalinske, he did something different. He looked at the games EA was making. He saw John Madden football. He saw FIFA soccer.
And he realized these games will sell systems.
Exactly. So he made a deal, he swallowed his pride, and he gave EA a much lower licensing rate than any other publisher.
That's a masterstroke of pragmatism. He put winning the market ahead of his own ego.
And it worked perfectly. The Genesis became known as the sports console. If you were in a college dorm room or a frat house in 1994, you owned a Sega Genesis for Madden.
But not every single innovation went that smoothly, did it? We have to talk about the Sega CD and the whole Night Trap controversy.
Oh, boy. Yeah. This is where the United States Congress gets involved.
Sega releases a CD-ROM add-on for the Genesis. It was a bit clunky, but it allowed for full-motion video and games. And one of the flagship launch titles was this game called Night Trap.
Which was basically an interactive B-movie. It was about these vampires or augurs attacking a teenage slumber party.
And when you look at it today, it's incredibly tame. It's so campy and silly. But at the time, it caused a full-blown moral panic.
Oh, yeah. Senators were holding up footage from the game in congressional hearings, claiming it promoted violence against women. It was a huge political firestorm.
And here's the real irony. The chairman of Nintendo of America, Howard Lincoln, he sat in those same hearings and he just threw Sega under the bus.
He was absolutely ruthless. He postured as the family-friendly company, saying, Nintendo doesn't have games like this on our systems. He painted Sega as this peddler of filth to try and destroy their reputation with parents.
But Kalinske played it so smart. Instead of getting defensive, he took the high road. He voluntarily created a video game rating system, the VRC, to label games by age appropriateness.
And Nintendo, at first, refused to join it. Their argument was, we don't need ratings because we only make good, clean games. But eventually, the entire industry realized they needed a unified standard to avoid government regulation.
And the ESRB, the Entertainment Software Rating Board, the ratings we see on every single game today, E for everyone, M for mature, that was largely based on the system Sega created.
So Kalinske essentially civilized the entire industry while being attacked for supposedly destroying it.
So let's take stock. We're in 1993, maybe early 1994. Sega has done the impossible. They've gone from less than 10% of the market to over 55%. They have beaten Nintendo. They are on top of the world.
They are on top of the world. And this, for me, is where the story gets really, really interesting. Because this is the exact moment where they begin to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
The what-ifs.
The great what-ifs. The expert analysis of this era and what the book lays out so well usually points to two massive, catastrophic decisions that were made by Sega of Japan, completely ignoring Kalinske and the American team's advice.
Let's start with the first one. The Silicon Graphics chip.
Okay, so Silicon Graphics, or SGI, they were the absolute premier high-end graphics company in the world at the time. They made the technology that created the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park.
Wow, okay. Top of the line.
The best of the best. And their founder, a guy named Jim Clark, goes directly to Tom Kalinske, and he says, we've designed a brand new chipset specifically for a next-generation video game console. It's revolutionary. And we want to partner with Sega to build it.
Kalinske must have been ecstatic. He calls up the board in Japan and says, Guys, we have the golden ticket here. This is the future.
And Sega of Japan, they send their engineers over to California to look at it, and their engineers report back, no, that chip is too big, it produces too much heat, it will never work in a consumer device, and besides, they said, we are already working on our own new hardware.
It's the classic not invented here syndrome.
It is the textbook definition of not invented here syndrome. They were too proud, so they rejected it. They turned SGI down.
So what does SGI do?
They get back in their car, and they drive down the street to Nintendo. Yes! Nintendo buys the chip, and that chip becomes the central processing unit of the Nintendo 64.
Ouch. That is it. That is a monumental blunder.
Yeah.
So Sega literally handed their arch rival the weapon that would come to define 3D gaming for that entire generation.
And they gift-wrapped it for them. But wait, it gets worse.
How can it get worse than that?
Oh, it can get so much worse. We have to talk about the Sony partnership.
This one physically hurts to even talk about.
It's a tough one. So Sony, at the time, was looking to get into the video game industry. Two of their top executives, Olaf Olafsson and Mickey Schulhoff, approached Kalinske directly. They had a great relationship. And they proposed a joint console, a Sega-Sony machine.
Just stop and imagine that for a second. The gaming brand and software library of Sega, combined with the manufacturing power, the marketing muscle, and the consumer electronics dominance of Sony.
It would have been an absolute juggernaut, unstoppable. Kalinske and the Sony US team, they hammer out a deal. They agree to split the costs, split the losses, and split the profits 50-50. For Sega, it was a virtually risk-free way to enter the next generation with a powerhouse partner.
Kalinske is thrilled. He takes his perfect deal to the board in Japan. And Nakayama, the man who trusted him before, what did he say this time?
Nakayama's response, and this is quoted in the book, was essentially, Sony, they make televisions and Walkmans. They don't know how to make hardware for video games. Why would we ever work with them?
Sony doesn't know how to make hardware. That might be the single most expensive sentence ever uttered in business history.
It might be. It's just pure, unadulterated hubris. So Sony, feeling completely insulted and spurned, goes off angry and motivated, and they decide to build the console themselves. And they call it the PlayStation.
And because they were rejected, they designed it from the ground up, specifically to kill Sega.
That's the real tragedy of it. It feels like a Greek tragedy. The hubris of Sega of Japan was their downfall. They just couldn't stand the fact that the American branch was the one making all the big deals and getting all the credit, could they?
That's the absolute core of the conflict. Sega of Japan was looking at the numbers. In America, Sega was winning decisively. But in Japan, Sega was still a distant third, losing badly to Nintendo and even NEC.
So the Japanese executives felt that Kalinske was getting all the glory, but they believed that they were the ones making the brilliant hardware that made it all possible. They resented the Americans, and they wanted to reassert control over the company.
And that reassertion of control led directly to the Saturn disaster.
The Sega Saturn, the console that effectively killed the company. Sega of Japan was in a panic because they started hearing rumors about the technical specs of this new PlayStation specs they could have had. So they rushed their own console, the Saturn, to market.
And it was a complicated machine.
A total nightmare for developers. It had two separate processors. It was incredibly difficult to code for, especially for 3D graphics. But the hardware wasn't even the biggest problem. The launch. The launch was an absolute self-inflicted catastrophe.
This is where the civil war between Sega of America and Sega of Japan really comes to a head.
It boils over. At the very first E3, the Electronic Entertainment Expo in 1995, Kalinske is forced by the executives in Japan to make a surprise announcement. He gets up on stage in front of the whole industry and he says, the Sega Saturn is available right now, today.
Which, you know, on the surface, that sounds kind of cool. So surprise launch, go buy it now.
In theory, yes. In practice, it was corporate suicide. Why? Because they hadn't told the retailers. KB Toys, Walmart, Best Buy. They had no idea this was coming. They had no stock. They were absolutely furious at being blindsided. In fact, KB Toys was so angry, they actually kicked Sega out of all their stores in retaliation.
Wow. And they hadn't told the developers either, right?
No. So there were barely any games ready for the launch. And then there was the price.
What was the price?
$399. In 1995 money, that was a very expensive machine.
And then comes the mic drop moment. This is one of the most famous or infamous moments in the history of E3.
Immediately after Sega's disastrous keynote, Sony holds their press conference. Steve Race, who used to work for Sega and had been hired away by Sony, he walks onto the stage, he kind of shuffles his papers at the podium, and he leans into the microphone, he says one word.
$2.99.
$2.99.
And then he just walks off the stage.
He just turns around and walks off. And the room just erupted. It was over. In that 1 second, the war was over. The PlayStation was $100 cheaper. It was easier to develop for. It had better 3D graphics. And all the retailers loved Sony because they had been treated like partners. Sega was dead in the water.
It's just heartbreaking. You have this brilliant team in America, Kalinske, Al Nilsson, Madeline Schroeder, who built this incredible empire from nothing, and they just had to stand by and watch it be dismantled from the inside by their own company.
And Nintendo didn't just sit idly by, either. While Sega was completely fumbling the Saturn launch, Nintendo pulled an absolute rabbit out of the hat with Donkey Kong Country.
I love that game. The graphics were incredible.
They were, but here's the brilliant strategy behind it. Nintendo used that SGI graphics technology, but they used it on the old Super Nintendo. It was a 16-bit game that looked better than most of the early 32-bit games on the Saturn.
It proved you didn't need to buy a new expensive console yet.
Exactly. It sold millions and millions of copies. It kept Nintendo hugely profitable while they took their time perfecting the N64.
And Nintendo finally started using Sega's old marketing tactics against them.
The Play It Loud campaign. They finally got edgy and aggressive. Just as Sega was trying to become more mature and respectable with the Saturn, Nintendo started acting like the cool, rebellious kid. They completely flipped roles.
Eventually, Kalinske he's had enough.
The trust was completely broken. Nakayama, the man who hired him on that beach in Hawaii, the man who said, boring, yes, had completely stopped listening to him. He'd stopped trusting him. Kalinske leaves Sega in 1996.
The end of an era. But there is one beautiful final grace note to this whole story. A letter.
Yes, it's such a perfect ending. When Kalinske announces he's leaving, he receives a letter at his office. It's marked personal and confidential. It's from Howard Lincoln,
the chairman of Nintendo. His arch nemesis, the man who fought him tooth and nail in the press and in front of Congress.
the same guy.
And what did it say?
It was incredibly gracious. Lincoln praised Kalinske. He thanked him for helping to build the entire video game industry into what it had become. He even credited him with being the driving force behind creating the E3 trade show. And he basically said, "You are a worthy adversary. You made us better."
That axe gives me chills. Despite all the public vitriol and the marketing attacks, behind the scenes there was this deep mutual respect.
Because they both knew they were building something new and huge. Before the console wars, video games were seen as a niche toy for kids. After the console wars, video games were a dominant form of global entertainment, bigger than Hollywood. They built the stadium that everyone else plays in today.
So when we look back at all this, what does it all mean? Why does this story still matter today?
I think more than anything, it's a profound lesson in corporate alignment. Sega of America and Sega of Japan were never truly aligned. America was fighting a marketing war about attitude and branding. Japan was fighting an engineering war about who had the better specs. And when those two goals diverged, the entire company just fractured.
It's also a lesson about listening to your boots on the ground, right? Kalinske was in the American market. He knew what the American consumer wanted. The executives in Japan thought they knew better because of their past successes.
That's it exactly. Corporate ego is the silent killer of innovation. Rejecting a partnership with Sony because they don't know how to make hardware is the ultimate example of ego blinding you to a world-changing opportunity.
And you just have to look at the legacy. The ESRB rating system we all use today, that's Kalinske's legacy. The fact that games are launched on specific street dates with massive global hype. That's from Al Nilsson and the Sega team.
Yeah.
The entire idea of a console as a cool, edgy lifestyle product for adults, that's Sega.
They lost the war, ultimately. Sega started making consoles in 2001 after the Dreamcast failed. They became a software-only company, making games for their old rivals, Nintendo and Sony. But they completely changed the way the war was fought forever.
Before we wrap this up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Just imagine an alternate universe for a moment. A universe where Hayao Nakayama says yes to the SGI chip. Or, even more profoundly, where he says yes to the Sony partnership.
The Sega PlayStation.
The Sega PlayStation. Imagine that world. Would Nintendo have even survived that generation? Would Microsoft have ever bothered to enter the market with the Xbox?
It is, without a doubt, the greatest what-if in the history of technology. A Sega-Sony monopoly in the mid-90s might have been even bigger and more dominant than the Nintendo monopoly they were originally trying to break.
Okay.
It sends shivers down my spine thinking about the kinds of games we might have played in that timeline.
Yeah, that's a wild thought to end on. Thank you for listening to this deep dive into the incredible book, Console Wars. It's a story of ambition, of creativity, and the truly heartbreaking reality of corporate politics.
It really is. A tragedy and a triumph all rolled into one.
Thanks for watching the Strategy Sync YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the best business books. We'll see you on the next level.